Hare Krishna. Welcome back to our study of the Yoga Sutras. Today we are going to discuss sutras number 42 and 43. Where starting from this point on, Patanjali is going to take us into the very deep understanding of what Samadhi, how a yogi enters into the deepest states of Samadhi, and what is that whole spectrum that exists even within the stages of Samadhi. That is a science that we're going to understand starting from this sutra onwards. So very quickly, how did we arrive here? We went through a very long journey in this book already, in this chapter specifically, where Patanjali begins in the very opening sutra, sutra number 2, where he defined yoga as yoga chitta vritti nirodha. And then we saw what happens when the mind is regulated. Then one is situated in one's own true form. If the mind is not regulated, then one identifies with those vrittis. So then Patanjali very technically elaborated what those 5 vrittis are and how this yoga process is centered around this abhyasa and vairagya, practice and detachment. And using that, we are trying to involute. And when you involute, we attain to that state of samadhi. So there he saw this example of 2 types of samadhis, sampragyata and asampragyata samadhis. And what are those favorable virtues needed to attain samadhi? And most importantly, there was also the easy way of attaining the state of samadhi, which was Ishvara Pranidhana, which also helps one to overcome all the obstacles. And after having listed the whole list of obstacles, those 9 plus 4, 13 list of internal challenges that one goes through, Patanjali gives 7 techniques to overcome these obstacles, which include developing good virtues in one's life, regulating one's breath, taking support of dreamless sleep and dreams, meditating on the great spiritual preceptors. We saw the whole list of 7 techniques in the previous session. And by doing so, when one overcomes those chitta vikshepas, when the mind is peaceful, then the mind is in a state of complete absorption. It is ready to absorb into an object of meditation. And that absorbed state, we call it as samapatti. And we discussed in the previous sutra that samapatti is the state of the chitta which enables the mind to enter into the stage of samadhi. That was the subtle distinction between samapatti and samadhi we saw. And today, Patanjali is going to begin the whole samadhi spectrum by talking about this concept called as savitarka and nirvitarka samapatti, right? Now these words vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita is something that we already studied in sutra number 17 as a general understanding of how the involution happens. That science which he very briefly spoke about in sutra 17 will now be elaborated. How the yogi is going to go deeper in their meditative states and how that involution is happening, how they are disconnecting from the outer layers of understanding to a more refined, deeper layer is the spectrum that Patanjali is going to talk about. So let us now see what this sutra number 22 is. Tatra shabdartha jnana vikalpe samkirna savitarka samapattihi. So what is it? Tatra, then after attaining that state of samapatti, shabda artha jnana. Shabda means words that we use in our day-to-day communication. Artha is the meaning of those words, right? The specific meaning of the words. And jnana is the whole conception of what that word is representing, what that meaning is trying to convey. So this shabda, artha, jnana are 3 distinct things. They mix up, some kirana, they are mixed up, and that state is called as savitarka samapatti or samapatti, which is based on some deliberation. It's a very conscious state of samadhi. At this stage called savitarka samapatti, the word, meaning and concepts are blended. So to understand this distinction in words, meaning and concepts, right? Here's a very, very simple example. Now in the English language, there is a word called as the cow, which is just a 3-letter word. Now that word or that sound cow in itself may not mean anything, right? But those who understand that language, they understand, oh, we are referring to a very, very specific animal, right? So cow means that 4-legged animal. You know, in our day-to-day interactions, if I'm traveling somewhere and I happen to see that see a cow, I'm not going to come home and say, look, I saw today a four-legged animal, with a big belly and horns and udder and that which gives milk. Instead of such long description, I just use the word called as cow. That is a specific meaning, artha, right? But even beyond artha is the jnana, is a knowledge of the concept of cow. What do you mean the concept of cow? This cow, it is not just any animal, but there's a whole embodied understanding of what the cow is what is there as a conceptual understanding of cow, as a very gentle animal, its whole persona, how it is such a useful animal, how it is such a revered animal in the Vedic culture. All of these conceptions are included within the cow. And many times the Shabda, Artha and Jnana are so disconnected within us, right? We may not understand. Sometimes in our day-to-day conversation, we may just say cow, or sometimes we just refer to any other random, that specific four-legged animal, cow. But we may not carry with us the complete conception of the cow, right? So this is how the Shabda, Artha, Jnana are differentiated. That's why many times we will see language many times plays a barrier, acts like a barrier in communication, because my jnana, my concept could be something so much more deeper and profound, but due to lack of words, or sometimes even due to inability to express properly, right, I may not communicate my real jnana concept through the limited meaning that words may offer sometimes. This is the limitation of language, right? And many times that is how miscommunication happens, right? So this understanding of Shabda, Artha, Jnana is specifically used in the context of meditation here, in the sense that how things are operating at a very subtle level here, at a very deeper level here. If you recall how we took the example of that meditation on the rose in Sutra number 17, when we discussed Sampragyata Samadhi, I'm going to recall that same example here. And if you remember in the previous sutra, we discussed also that in that state of samapatti, the mind becomes like a crystal, and it can focus on the knower, knowing, or the known, right? What do you mean by the knower, knowing, and the known? In this specific example, the subject, the knower, is I, or the person who is meditating. The object is the known, which is the rose upon which one is meditating. And then the interaction is the process of knowing or meditating. So these are the three things which are involved. And at this stage, the yogi's mind is completely focused on all of these. Though they are blended together, but there is no other distraction coming in the yogi's mind. This is all that exists in the yogi's awareness. I am meditating on a rose. That is all that exists. There are no distractions, nothing happening. That is how deep this deliberation samapatti or savitarka samapatti is. But as the yogi progresses further, one gives up even the savitarka samapatti and enters into the next deeper stage, which is called as nirvitarka samapatti. Now the word tarka means logic, rational, deliberation. Savitarka means with deliberation. So at this stage, the samapatti is with deliberation, but as one becomes competent in that, it becomes non-deliberate absorption of the mind, which means very naturally, very unconsciously one starts meditating. And what happens at that particular stage very beautifully is described in the next sutra. It says, Smriti parishuddhau swarupa shunyevartha matra nirbhasa nirvitarka. At this stage, what happens? Smriti, one's memory, parishuddhau, becomes so purified that swarupa shunya, swarupa means one's nature, and the memory behaves as if it has lost its nature. Meaning, what is the role, what is the function of our memory? To remember things, right? Every time I am looking at the world around me, I use the support of my memory to understand the world around me, right? Now, when I suddenly look at something, as soon as I look at this, I say, oh, this is a pencil. So my memory reminds me that this is a pencil, right? So, but then in this particular stage, when the smriti becomes so purified, that particular state of Swarupa Shunya iti, when the memory completely purified of its own, it becomes as if it is devoid of its own ability to store and recall, right? At that stage, Arthamatra Nirbhasa, all that remains is the object in its true meaning. That's it. That particular state is called as Nirvitarka Samapatti, right? In Nirvitarka Samapatti, the memory completely purified, as if devoid of its own nature, meaning that our memory is no more affecting our awareness, our consciousness. Then the object shines in its true knowledge in the mind. To understand this, right, what does it mean? How is memory and consciousness, how are they interacting? So to understand that, we'll introduce this concept of conceptual awareness and pre-conceptual awareness. What do I mean by conceptual awareness? Just like how I gave you the example of a pen. In our day-to-day interactions, many times, every time I interact with something, it stores, that information is stored. And when I re-interact with that object, there are certain impressions which are stored in my memory. They drive my understanding, my response to that. Like for example, when you see fire, immediately the impression that you have, hey, fire is hot. If you touch it, it will burn you, right? That understanding immediately is superimposed upon you. But whereas in pre-conceptual awareness, what does it mean? Where your mind is so absorbed, everything seems like new. In fact, you forget that I ever saw that fire before. You're just lost. You are so absorbed. You are looking at that fire as if this is the first time in your life you are interacting with that fire. To the point where even during that interaction, as you are looking at it, you even forget what that is. Meaning, I just saw fire and I forgot what it was. Again, you are still looking at fire. Even at that moment also, you're not creating any impressions. That is a state of, it is as if like you are constantly looking at that fire as if it is a new thing. You have never, ever seen it, right? Now, for many of us, this may seem very abstract. What do you mean? Like the closest you can think of is sometimes when you are lost in looking at something. You just want to keep, looking and looking and looking. Like sometimes when people go to these holy dhams, they go to these places of pilgrimage, and they go to these temples, and then they see these beautiful deities, and they are just mesmerized by the beauty of the Lord, and they're just staring and staring and staring. It seems like the mind never gets tired of that particular perception or of that interaction, right? And when one is so absorbed in looking at the beautiful form of the Lord, that they even forget that actually this what I'm looking at is some kind of a form, some shape. Perhaps one may even logically say, hey, this is just some carving, but one even forgets. One is so absorbed in that interaction, right, that none of these previously stored concepts are obstructing that vision at that point, right? Just to give you an example of how many times our impressions drive our perceptions, right? So you will immediately now look at the screen, and what did you see, right? Now, for some of you, you might have seen a hare, a rabbit, or maybe some of you might have seen a duck, right? A bird, right? Now, actually, both those perceptions may seem right. If you look at it from left to right or right to left, it depends on how you're looking at it. But actually, at that spur of the moment, when you just saw it, even though you haven't rationally processed that side, but immediately, whichever impression, whichever concept was strong in your head, that impression came out from your memory, and your mind told you, hey, that's a rabbit or that's a duck, right? But both the rabbit and the duck are conceptual awareness. When you enter into that state of pre-conceptual awareness, what happens is all that you will see in that picture is just some bunch of gray and black lines, right? You forget that I'm looking at even a duck, or none of those things obstruct your perception. That is how absorbed the yogi becomes they are so lost that they even forget what they're looking at, right? So at this particular stage, right, all that they see is just a bunch of lines. And extending our example of that rose, now the yogi is just focusing on that experience. Only that knowing process is all that remains. I am experiencing a rose. The focus slowly starts moving towards that experience of meditating on a rose and visualizing that rose in that state of trance. Rose here means whatever is that object of meditation, right? One gets lost in that knowing process itself, that interaction itself. And this goes further. This gets even more refined. This gets even more involuted. And how this transition is going to happen is something that Patanjali is going to very beautifully describe in the subsequent sutras. So in this particular sutra, we saw this concept of savitarka and nirvitarka, with deliberation. And once the memory stops, as one goes more deeper, this nirvitarka, or without any deliberation, one is no more using their logical faculties. It is just pure, unalloyed, complete absorption. That is all that is happening at this particular stage, right? And then there is more to come up in the future sutras. So the chapter is only going to get more and more exciting now. We are getting an inside view of what an advanced yogi undergoes in their deeper states of trance. So stay tuned and join us soon for the next session. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.